Alright, Eternal Blessings. We are back with another video. Before I begin, just a couple quick announcements. 8th Annual Journey of the Black Adept Conference. That's going to take place October 30th to November 2nd. It's going to kick off with a meet and greet on Thursday, October 30th. And that meet and greet will be about 7:30, 8 p.m. on that Thursday evening. And again, I'm going to keep pumping that out there, as I said, because I got a lot of people emailing me as far as making travel arrangements, so they're there in time for the meet and greet. So if you are coming for that meet and greet opening ritual night, it'll be about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. So just if you're flying and making reservations, just come in. We'll be there in time for around that time. That's all. All right, so that'll be on Thursday, October 30th. Hang tight. I'm trying to switch around here. Hang tight. And then on Friday and Saturday, which is October 31st, which is it's wonderful because it falls perfectly in alignment with what we're doing on so-called Halloween, or the Devil's Sabbath, or the Feast of Samhain, whatever you want to call it. We will have our indoor ritual that night, which is going to be, I'm just going to leave it there for the moment. But Friday and Saturday, same itinerary, classes and workshops from 9 to 4 p.m. On both nights, we meet back up later in the evening around 7:30, 8-ish, give or take, to do the ritual. And then both nights we follow with just a group dinner and a social. If you want to attend, we kind of just kick it, hang out, get some food. That's kind of just the chill part of the conference. All right, and then the conference wraps up on Sunday with a question and answer session with yours truly. And that wraps up the conference. You can attend virtually or in person. Shoot me an email. You can register and sign up right now. So shoot me an email at khnum19@gmail.com, and I'll send you information on that. If you're interested in a spiritual reading or a consultation, I offer various different types of readings: Klipothic demonic readings, Santa Muerte readings, Egyptian oracle readings, shadow work readings, deity readings to see what gods, goddesses, and demons walk with you. Maybe you're just interested in a consultation because you got a lot of questions about the occult or the left-hand path. As I said before, a lot of people utilize a consultation just to pick my brain. They got a bunch of questions that come with best way to do that, if you got questions, a lot of people come with, questions written down on paper so they can maximize their time in that consultation. Any of the aforementioned, shoot me an email, khnum19@gmail.com. And please include in that email your availability on a weekly basis and the time zone you're in, and we'll find a day and time that works for both of us, all right? Also, if you want to sign up for classes, go to my Patreon page, patreon.com/Baniti, Baniti. Check out Tier 3. Tier 3, if you join Tier 3, that gives you access to the 3 private classes I do every month on Patreon, including the group ritual we do together at the end of the month. Also, keep in mind, when you join Tier 3, it doesn't just give you access from the day you join moving forward. You get access to everything in the archives, and it's a lot. I don't even think you'll have enough time in this lifetime to do all the work in there. And again, I say with confidence, not arrogance. Nobody is offering what I'm offering for the price I'm offering it for. If you're looking to take your path of self-mastery to the next level, you want to get in the game, and you don't want to sit on the sidelines no more, because we got a lot of armchair magicians in the occult. They're book readers. They like to sit around, read books, talk heavy shit, but they ain't got no body of work to produce anything that they're talking about. So that's kind of the purpose of the Patreon. Check it out, patreon.com/Baniti, Baniti. When you go to the page, go to the collection section. When you get to the page, you will see all the ongoing classes with constant new content being added, new classes on a regular basis. All right? Also, don't forget to check out the social media pages. Primordial Chaos 9, all one word, on Instagram. Primordial Chaos, 2 words, on Facebook. And primordialchaos.com 3 on Instagram. That's the best place to stay abreast of the latest happenings, classes, events, Anything I'm doing here at Primordial Chaos is on those pages, so go to those platforms, subscribe, stay abreast, and those are good other options to stay in contact with me, all right? And don't forget to check out the Primordial Cast podcast, available on Spotify and all major podcast platforms. The direct link to my podcast, my contact email address, the social media pages, the Patreon page to sign up for classes. All of those links are in the description box of this video that you are watching at this very moment, all right? So I'm going to do a final part on this. This is actually part 2. I got a lot of emails on the Who is Melchizedek video I did about a week or so ago, maybe a little longer, whatever it was, about a week and a half ago, whatever. So I got a lot of emails about that and asking if I could do a follow-up. A couple of people requested if I could tie more into what the ancient mystic order of Melchizedek is, or some call it the order of Melchizedek. If I could elaborate a little more on that, because as I've said before, there is so much shit out there, a lot, when it comes to Melchizedek. Now, the order of Melchizedek, for an example, we'll start there. We kind of went over, and we might have to touch base in certain areas briefly on what we went over in the previous video, but this video is more going to follow up what is the order of Melchizedek. Now, if you Google this, you can go on Amazon, you could just Google, you could go to ChatGPT. Just like everything else in the spiritual world of consciousness, you can find New Age fluffy stuff on Melchizedek, very New Agey. You can find more mystical in the so-called Hebrew spectrum of things. You can find some stuff connected to Sufism when it comes to things of more of an occult nature. But I'm going to expound a little bit further on some of the titles that he is known by in the order, and there's a connection to Sufism and Islam, with this being called Melchizedek, or the angel Michael, if you want to refer to him as Michael, right? Because the reason why that title, Angel of Justice, or Melchizedek, because as I told you, that incident that took place, or the war that transpired in heaven. So I got to teach this again. Keep in mind, I got to go from a scriptural basis. Got to keep that in mind. Okay, very important that you understand that. So I'm teaching this if we're looking at it through those lenses. So you have to research it through that point. Now it goes beyond that, but I have to go from that aspect so you can see, because there was a book too. I just can't remember the name of it, which is a good reference point. I'll see if I can find it and post it in the chat. I was browsing through it a couple of days ago. I can't remember the title. It's Order of Melchizedek something. I can't remember the author. But anyway, so when you study and you get more into the mystical orders when it comes to certain aspects of biblical history, so why the strong connection with the order of Melchizedek and the person or the character or the individual we know as Jesus, as mentioned in the Bible? As I showed you before, those quotes in Hebrews, and I showed you that Jesus obviously had an angel that revealed a divine message to him, a revelation, which is the book of Revelations. I made it clear. We went over in the last video to show you this Melchizedek has been there, to show you this is not a human being. He's been there over a long stretch and period of time. We showed you the order of Melchizedek mentioned specifically by that word in Hebrews, and it's also was saying that Christ was a priest after the order of Melchizedek. So when we look through the lineage of the prophets, the so-called prophets in the Bible, going back from Abraham's time all the way up to Yeshua, right? There was also a brotherhood known. We have to also stop and pinpoint John the Baptist, or Yohanan, right? Or John as he is known, right? It is a known fact that John the Baptist belonged to an order called the Essenes, right? Now, if you research the Essenes, you will also find the character mentioned in the New Testament, Zechariah. He also, and it's been said that Jesus, the ones that came and so-called came and retrieved his body off the cross and prepared it for burial, these were some of his secret disciples, or those that belong to the Essene Brotherhood. Now, you find some of this mentioned, and now that's up to you whether you accept that or not. You can find this in some of the lost books of the Bible, right? The Essenes, though, if you Google it, it's a known order that actually still kind of operates today. Now, what did the Essenes deal with? Well, they believed, if you look in research, what the Essenes were about, they dealt with higher mystical teachings that went beyond, and I'm going to connect this to the order, that went beyond, quote unquote, surface religion, right? They dealt with kind of similar teachings that, per se, if we had to liken it into the Sufis, understanding what divine ishq is, or divine love. They dealt with, what would you hear me talk about, what Christ was teaching, or who they call Christ in the Bible was teaching, antinomianism, animism, right? Understanding the aspect of nature and creation in relation to ourselves, the micro and the macrocosm, right? Seeing the aspect of the Creator in every aspect of existence. They took it to a deeper esoterical level. Now, when you get into some of the higher science, they dealt with the sciences of healing, levitation, right? Transcendental states of meditation, tapping into the divine, activating high states of consciousness. I mean, all those things you would find in a spiritual order that was designed around mastering yourself. Now, the Magi that you see also mentioned that came, quote unquote, some people also connect them to this sacred order, the three kings, because they were also masters of astrology, right? They knew how to read. They knew how to read the stars, the movement of the planets. This is how they were able to chart the birth and the time frame of Yeshua, and this is why they traveled. Now, you also got to research who those three Magi were, according to the Bible, and where they came from. It was Persia, Balthazar, I can't think of all the names, but I know they were from what we would call kings from the Far East. I know one was Persia, Northeast Africa, and I can't remember where one of them. They even depict one of them as being melanated or black. But these three kings, it was their duty to go recognize the birth, because this was prophesized, something that they talked about in their sacred order. Right? Now, you see this order also filters down in Islam, you will find, and even years back, when you go back to, as I said before, my history back in the day with the Ansar Rule Law community amongst the Muslims, and in the Quran it mentions another title of this Melchizedek by the title El-Qubt, right? Q-U-B-T, which means center or axis, right? And this is also the term you get that you'll see was used for the first true Christian churches, or what's being called Christian, the Orthodox churches, which Christianity started in Egypt, right? And so-called links supposedly to who they call the disciple Mark, right? And you can get into that whole history, but the Coptic Christians, right? When you're talking about that area in Egypt and Northeast Africa, Ethiopia, they were the Coptics or the Coptics, right? The first so-called Christian. And the way that branch of what we're calling Christianity is practiced is nothing like what you see so-called here, especially in the West and Europe and North America. It's because this is Roman. What Christianity practices, it's Pauline Christianity, it's Paul, it's Roman doctrine mixed with paganism and elements of biblical teachings. It's the way Catholicism and Christianity is practiced in the West. That's not how it's practiced in its original form amongst the Coptics or the Coptics in Egypt and Northeast Africa, right? Now, there's also a connection with the Dead Sea Scrolls that were found in the Qumran caves in 1947. I forgot, Qumran in Syria, I believe it was, right? And it was known fact amongst historians that the Essenes had access to those scrolls. So some of those things that I was saying, they kept some of those scrolls sacred, some of them teaching sacred. Now, there's a lot of theory when those scrolls were found, how they got there and how they were uncovered. I don't have time to do that in this video. I mean, if somebody's interested, we can do a video and focus on the Dead Sea Scrolls. But the Dead Sea Scrolls were kept sacred because, and again, I'm just putting this out there, you do your research. There was teachings in those scrolls, and some of those, what's being referred to as the lost books of the Bible, and Gospel of Barnabas being one of them. Now, there's debate with the history of the Gospel of Barnabas, the authenticity of it, because of some of the language. Some say it only goes back to Roman times, but there's a good resource book I want to give on that. There's other evidence to prove that's not true, because when you match up, I know I'm doing a lot here and I'm trying to do it quick. When you match up the years of the Jubilee, right, you can kind of get a better picture of it. But I'm not going to get into that whole debate. But Gospel of Barnabas is supposedly one that was found in those lost Dead Sea Scrolls. Some say the Gospels of Thomas and some other lost books of the Bible. You can go do that research. And there's a lot of stories in there about Yeshua that say otherwise of what's in the four synoptic Gospels and the letters of Paul in the New Testament. Now, again, I'm just going to throw stuff out there because, like it says in Genesis 6, if people believe where it says in the first couple of chapters that man will not always be flesh. His flesh would live to 120 years. People say that quote is Jesus, that Jesus was there present at that time. That quote that I mentioned in the last video, if that's the case, then you're saying Jesus lived to 120 years. The Bible says otherwise. It says he was crucified and died at the age of 33. But in those Dead Sea Scrolls, it says, I'm not going to get into the whole story. I've done videos on it. The crucifixion is a dicey subject because the Gospel of Barnabas says that Judas was transfigured to look like Jesus and was put in his place as a sacrificial lamb. And Hebrews 7 and Hebrews 5, where it talks about the cup being passed from him, that he was heard, and that in which the supplications and prayers that he was offering up in the Garden of Gethsemane, that he was heard and he was spared from death. That's what that quote in Hebrews was, if you were paying attention to what I read to you last time. Well, the Gospel of Barnabas says, in that whole ruckus that took place in the Garden of Gethsemane, when they came to seize him, John talks about it, that there was like they all fell to the ground, but then he doesn't get into detail of what happened in the scuffle. But Barnabas, who was one of the original 12, who was there, and I'm just saying how this is recorded. I want to be clear on that, okay? It says clearly in there that Jesus was transfigured to look like Judas, and Judas was transfigured to look like Jesus. And this is why you see Jesus the next day appearing. People say, well, why if he appeared in spirit, why was he wearing gardener's clothes? Who was he hiding from if he had rose from the dead? There's just a lot of theological debate. Look, that's a long discussion. So I'm not going to get into that here. We can save that for another time. But that's what the Gospel of Barnabas and some of these lost Gospels record, that he never made it. In the Surah 4, in the Quran, it says the same thing. Surah 4, verse 157. They did not crucify him. It was made to look that way. They never fully elaborate on what they're referring to. And if you think that quote in Genesis 6 is valid and it's Jesus, it says he lived to 120 years. Now there is recordings of that, of him living to 120 years in these Gospels. So you make that choice. So that's why that's being said. Some Gospels laid the claim, and these councils of Nicaea, they had to leave some of these books out because it's a complete contradiction into what's being taught or what has been taught over the years. So this sacred brotherhood, they protected the secret. The Essene order is that order of Melchizedek, right? They were in alignment with the teachings of Melchizedek, who always would appear, because the reason why he's always likened unto Christ, and people, and like the Jehovah's Witnesses and other groups say he is Christ, is because the likeness was so similar in appearance, number one, and in two, in what was being taught, that's why Jesus is referred to as one of the chief high priests after the order of Melchizedek, the angel of justice, which is the angel Michael, right? Those were titles. Keep in mind, Melchizedek is the Greek, or Melchizedek is the Hebrew. It's just referring to one of his many titles. Michael means who dares to be like God, or El, right? So you see this being, this is why it's recorded as the Ancient of Days. He wasn't a mortal being. He was one of these mystical beings that we work with on the, if you want to call it the occult or the spiritual path that we're on, of self-mastery. That's what Melchizedek taught. He taught things of a higher order. And that's why it's referred to as the order of Melchizedek, because he was teaching divine laws that dealt with how the universes function. How, he taught them, like when we're talking about things, negating the spell of time. He taught things that were outside of a three-dimensional existence and understanding. That's why it was referred to as a order, a higher order, a higher understanding of certain things, okay? He taught a higher understanding and overstanding or understanding of these things. Okay, so that's why it was referred to as an order. So the Essenes were connected to him. John the Baptist, the whole lineage of the prophets in the Bible from Abraham's time, you saw him appear to David. David was referred to as a priest after the order of Melchizedek, or Dawid, as we know in Hebrew. All the prophets, it was something that was passed in their lineage, because that was the being that was sent to guide them with esoterical knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of things of a higher nature and order. That's what gave them the ability to have prophethood. Now, there's a connection with the Son, because yes, you could say Melchizedek is synchronized with other deities in other cultures. Some will synchronize him with Ra in ancient Egypt. And it just depends on your school of thought, who's teaching it. Okay? Of course, he's a high deity when you study in Hebrew mysticism, and when you go back into the ancient Hebraic teachings, because that's his origin, where you find him again first mentioned in the Torah in the book of Genesis, chapter 14. Again, he's known as Al-Qubt amongst the Sufis in Islam, right? And he's known as the being who guides that order. And what does he do in the Sufi order? And this is kind of some of the stuff that we're going to be touching on in the Eastern Left-Hand Path occult class. We touch on some of this stuff, Sufism, and there's something I'm not going to make the announcement here. And actually, we're starting. I just haven't gotten the title and the name together. I'll save that announcement when it's all organized. I don't want to put it out there in bits and pieces. So I'm going to be launching an order that delves into this stuff and deeper, but it's going to be a very organized, and all I'm going to say is going to be a very organized, structured order, not in the sense religious and fanatical, but in the sense of discipline. And it's not going to be for everybody, because it's going to take discipline and commitment. There will be a certain dress for this order, yes. There will be certain requirements you must meet, right? This is going to, and yes, some of these teachings that I'm talking about here, but even deeper, going into the whole mysteries of Lucifer, Melchizedek, a lot of these things, but actually exploring them, not just talking about them, right? But I'll get more of a clearer announcement with that when it's all, as I finalize it. But again, back to let me finish up, because I'm almost back to my destination. So again, he's known as Al-Qubt amongst the Sufis in Islam, right? There was even an order that we had back in the day amongst the Ansars called the Ancient Mystic Order of Melchizedek, or Amen. And that's what we dealt with. We dealt with the mysteries of the being called Al-Qubt, or Melchizedek, Ancient of Days, right? So you got to start with the history. That's why I referred to in that last video, from the time of Abraham, the prophets, and the lineage of all the prophets from that time of Abraham up to Yeshua. You will find that all those prophets were connected or initiated in that order. Now, the Ancient Mystic Order of Melchizedek. Now, you will find amongst, want to go back to real quick, the person Yohanan, or John the Baptist. This is why he was called the forerunner of the Messiah, the voice of one crying out in the wilderness to prepare the way for Yeshua. Now, if you read at that time, the order he belonged to, they were very in tune with nature. They lived off the land. As it says in the Bible, they ate locusts and honey and plants. That is the Essene order. Do your research. And that's why it was Yohanan, or John the Baptist, that was the one. That was kind of an initiation where the Spirit was placed on him, as it said. And then it says, what does it say after that? And you hear a voice from heaven, right? All the symbolism, the white dove springs up, and then you hear a voice from him, this is my son in whom I am well pleased, right? And remember, it said Christ glorified not also himself, as it is said in another place, he is a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And then, as I told you guys, the Catholic priesthood, they try to imitate this order, but they have no idea what they're doing. Okay, the Levitical priesthood had a connection to it, or the Cohens, but they dealt with the ritualistic part of the order, right? Because if you understand the Cohen or the Levitical priesthood, now somebody brought up the question to me: is there a connection? You see the book of Leviticus, the Levites, Leviathan. Is there? Well, when you look at a Cohen and you look at, the headdress, there can be a connection with that. right? Because remember, they dealt with a lot of, they were the ones that, as I said in the last video, they were the ones authorized to deal with the burnt offerings and the blood offerings. Only the Levite tribe could go in there and administer the Holy of Holies, the Kohanes as they were called, right? And as I told you before, they had to wear a certain dress. They had to have certain garments on. The breastplate was of certain metals and stones because it was a conductor of energy, and they had to wear it to protect themselves, certain tassels. They also went in there, if you read, and it's in the book of Leviticus, can't remember the chapter, just look up Urim and Thummim. U-R-I-M, one word, Thurin, and it was a divination. They were stones. They used, and people don't, this is what I'm saying, people, well, all that stuff they do in the cult, they read stones and cards and oracles. That's what the Levite, the Kohen priesthood did. They carried a book of stones called the Urim and Thummim. It's right there mentioned in Leviticus. And they would go into the Holy of Holies and they would do divination. Remember, when you're saying the word divination, it's from the word divine. Divination is a term used to tap into the divine. That's all you're saying. Right? People say, oh, what divine? That means evil, divination. You're doing devil stuff. Say, people are fucking ignorant and spooked out because they don't take time to do the research. Then the Kohen and the Levitical priests, they were devil worshippers, according to religious people's definition of what divination is. It tells you clear in there. They would carry this pouch with stones like runes, and they would cast the stones and they would ream the stones as if they were mouthpieces of the Creator. This was very ritualistic. All these things went on in the sacred temple amongst the priesthood. So there's a connection with the Kohen Levitical high priests. There's a connection with the Essene order. It's all connected to the ancient mystic order of Melchizedek. Now remember, orders have different degrees. Just like if you go into the Masonic Lodge, you go into the Rosicrucian order, just like if you go into OTO, the Shriners, there's levels, there's degrees, or they call them houses, like Masonry. They have the Blue House, which is broken down into 3 degrees. Entered Apprentice, Fellowcraft, Master Mason. Then they have Red House. If you go to the Scottish Rite, you have 32 degrees of the Red House. And then if you go to the you have the Red House, you have the Scottish Rite. I'm trying to think of it on the other side. I'm drawing Red House and Mason. I'm drawing a fucking blank. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank. It's 2 sides. And I went through it and I can't fucking remember. Isn't that pretty fucking sad? Oh, Royal Ark. I'm sorry. Royal Ark is more dealing with the Hebrew mystical side when you go into the Red House of Masonry. A lot of the stuff that I'm talking about. Where the Scottish Rite focuses more on the esoterical aspect. And again, as I said, most Masons think they're getting the sacred word of a Master Mason on the Master Mason degree in the Blue House, and it's not. That's the substitute word for a Pastor Mason. So these orders were done in degrees and houses, and it was done like that for a reason, because not everybody would be able to walk that quote-unquote ladder, right? The story of Jacob's ladder and what Yaqub, they say he wrestled with the Creator. I went over that with you guys before, right? At a place called Peniel, and spelled with a PH. Some say Peniel, some say Peniel, which is pineal. As I said before, that's talking about ascending those ladders. It's talking about the spine. It's talking about the ascending or so-called activating all the chakras, the crown chakra being open. Him meeting, quote-unquote, which is an esoterical term, face-to-face with the Creator. And then his name is changed from Yaqub to Yisrael. And Israel, or as you know in English, or Yisrael means to ascend to El, or to ascend to God. So he was initiated, and then his name is changed to reflect that initiation. So these orders were done in sacred degrees, or sometimes broken down into houses. And you'll see that. Now, there's a lot of shit you can pull up. Like I said, be careful, because there's a lot of new age fluffy shit out there. But that's something you're going to have to cipher through in your research. But yes, the ancient mystic order of Melchizedek is an order that spans across many different periods as far as what we know as linear time, and it's connected to a lot of the aforementioned groups and time periods. And you know, that's kind of the quick synopsis of it, right? I don't have time. I mean, there's more. I can go into more on this, but I just wanted to give clarity, because this is why you see the presence of Melchizedek like spanning such a large time, which confirms this couldn't be just a physical mortal being. And it makes it clear, no mother, no father, no beginning or name. The Ancient of Days, it refers to him as, right? And there's something, we hear this term that we heard as kids, Father Time. Some say Melchizedek is Father Time. Not because Father Time calculates time, Father Time transcends time, right? That's a whole nother story. Anyway, there's a lot more I could say on this, but I'm out of time. I'm about at my destination. All right. Let's go wrap it up for me. So anyway, if you need to reach out to me for a spiritual reading or a consultation, my contact email address, the direct link to the podcast, the social media pages, direct link to the Primordial Chaos Patreon page to sign up for classes. All of those links are in the description box of this video that you're watching right now. It's going to do it for me. Infernal blessings. I'm out of here.